Sigurd Wongraven from Satyricon is interior guest. Hello, Satyr.
Nice to meet you.
Let's talk a little bit about your last long play, Deep, Calleth Upon Deep. Frost and you are telling that it's the new chapter, it's a game changer. Is it really so?
I don't know if it's a game changer. What I've been saying all the way is that when I made the record, I didn't know whether it was going to be the last Satyricon record, and I still don't know that. But what I always thought when making the record is that if it's the last one, it better be special, and if it's not the last one, it should lead the way for Satyricon into the next 5-10 years or something like that. These were my thoughts when I was making it, and that's why the record is the way it is.
It's definitely the new chapter, but there are some quality stamps of Satyricon. Let's say the song To the Breeden in the Dark is, for instance, my favorite, but it leads me to connotations with the past, for instance, with black lava from Volcano and so on. So it's not definitely the new.
To Your Brethren in the Dark is almost like a Satyricon signature song, I would say. Melodically speaking, it has... basically, back in the early 90s, right, there were... I think every band in Norway wanted to not only just be a good band, but to be a band that had something which was unique for your band. So... in the case of Satyricon, I thought that maybe one of the things that I could do was take my love for the tonality of traditional Norwegian folk music and incorporate this into black metal. And To Your Brethren in the Dark, without a shadow of doubt, has very strong tonality coming from Norwegian folk music. And the first band to ever start to do this in black metal basically was Satyricon, and it became a part of our identity. And you can see it all the way through, since 1993 up till this day. So that's, your example of To Your Brethren in the Dark is an example of the band's sound altogether, regardless of which album it is from. But for me, it's with Deep, Calleth Upon Deep, it was never important that it was going to be a revolution or anything like that. I have never said that it is, and I don't think it is. What I have said is that it was very important for me that the album should have a spiritual presence, a strong spiritual presence, and that it would have some kind of core quality that was beyond just being a good record, that it was something more than just good music. And there are many reasons for that, but that was the way that I thought when I made it.
Sorry. Why Munch and why this particular picture?
This is a case where the picture chose us, not the other way around. This was, even though it's from 1898, I think that, if Edvard Munch was still alive and I explained to him the ideas of the music and the lyrics and the vision and ambition I had for this record, I think what he would have made for me would be this, This is Edvard Munch at his finest. This is from 1898, and probably between 1890 and 1900 is when he did his best work, amongst many others. The Scream, which was 1893, I think. Munch always felt, and he is very similar to black metal musicians of my generation in that way, that Munch said that whether a painting or an illustration, whether it's to be considered great art or complete, is not a question of like how many technical details it has. It is a question of will and emotion. And he said even one simple line can be a piece of art that is finished if it is done with will and emotion. And that was his thing. And interestingly enough, if you see Kiss of Death, which is on the cover of Deep Calleth Upon Deep, some of the earliest versions he did of that for the German art magazine Quickborn is a little bit more perfect. And then, and when he did the final version where he made the lithography, it was more rough, and he liked it more this way. And then you see people asking, like, is it a sketch? No, it's not a sketch, it's finished. But that's what Munch was like. Sometimes Munch would leave his paintings out in the rain and the snow because he felt that this could give the paintings more character. You know, yeah.
Nice
So yeah. So this is so I think, you know, this is a type of an artist that has okay, so he's known for his dark existentialism and angst-ridden type of artistry, but I think that most importantly, when you look for something to represent your album visually, you look for a picture that contains the emotions of the music and the emotions of the lyrics. And this has a very raw, naked, dark, twisted turn to it, and that's how I view the music. So it's a very organic choice. No discussions back or forth. It was, when you saw this, it seemed like a very obvious choice.
Coming back to the music, not only to the cover, Deep Calleth Upon Deep. It also reminds me about some songs of Satyricon. Without, I cannot imagine the live concerts. Like, for instance, from Volcano, it was Fuel for Hatred, for instance. So, is it also a right connotation between this album and the past albums?
No, I mean, no, I think this, to me, this is an album that speaks for itself. I think if I am to try and see a connection between this record and any other record, it would actually be the self-titled, because the album Satyricon from 2013 was a departure from what we did in the 2000s. It's very different from The Age of Nero and Now Diabolical and Volcano. And that album, the album Satyricon, being the way it was, opened the door for Deep Calleth Upon Deep. That's the way I see it.
There is one song which is about the Norwegian soldiers fighting in the Second World War. Yes. Yeah. So, are you interested in the Second World War history, or how the idea came to write about it?
No, because it's not so graphic. It's not about. It's not like a documentary type of lyric.
Of course.
So my thoughts on it were basically based on more existential thoughts. So basically, this relates to the song "Black Wings and Withering Gloom." And what was interesting was that during the Germans' attack on the north of Norway, realistically speaking, it was an impossible task for the Norwegian guerrilla soldiers when they were fighting their way up in the mountains, because first of all, they had very little ammunition, had really bad uniforms, no good weapons, and you know, the Nazis had everything. They had winter warfare outfits. They had lots of ammunition. They had better guns and whatnot. But the Norwegian guerrilla soldiers, they still did it because they felt that they had no choice. They had to fight for their country, for their land, for their people, and they were very young, you know. Not 45, but maybe 21. And it's interesting because, you know, today a 21-year-old is upset if the battery of the iPhone is empty, you know. But back then, people were thinking differently. And of course, many of these situations when I've seen interviews with these old men before they died. Most of them are dead now, but there are TV documentaries from not so long ago where they talk about they just talk about how, as they were fighting their way against artillery positions in the snow, the only sound they could hear were the bullets, and then eventually sometimes the soldiers next to them was hit, and just the sound of them falling in the snow, dying. And one of the guys explained like how he tried to work his way up to the artillery position, and he had no more ammunition, so he had to fight to death with a knife with a German soldier. And eventually, he was crying when he was telling this, and I thought to myself, this is basically how primal as it gets. Man to man, fight till death, And these sacrifices, this way of thinking, this determination, this will is what the lyrics is about, not so much the Second World War.
Yeah, that's right.
Of course.
You should definitely see the the Museum of Warsaw Uprising. If you haven't heard before, it's a good choice, I suppose. The same situation was in Warsaw in '44, and young people fought against Germans for 63 days. Yeah. And the sacrificial was terrible because all the city, 97% of the Warsaw was buried to the ground. But okay, let's go back to the music. Yeah. And maybe you told me that maybe it is the last, or maybe it's not the last album of Satyricon. But I've interested what's about the cover album, the covers. I know of course the Orgasmatron from Megiddo, but it was something like 10 or more years ago. Yeah. I know you like Holidays in Cambodia of Dead Kennedys. So when you will play the cover of Depeche Mode, I Feel You, for instance?
The cover album is called Formative Oddities, and that's something that we've been working on and off here and there. So the title is kind of self-explanatory in the way that formative referring to obviously things that shaped us, and oddities referring to not the usual black metal songs or thrash metal or whatever you would expect from a band like us. So we'll wait a little bit about telling people what exactly is going to be on it, but what we have been working on has been doing covers of styles of music that has been influential, but not necessarily a particular band, so let's say that on this album, maybe there will be some cover songs of a band that we are not big fans of, but maybe this band has one song which is a very good representative of a style of music that we have. Yeah. So this has been an interesting way for us of working, and also one other reason for doing a project like this is to we have to use our brains in a different way. The hardest thing is to write your own songs, and that's what we normally do. So the idea here is to try and also work a little bit on things that are outside our comfort zone and see what we can do with them, and sort of claim some ownership to them ourselves.
Okay. The last question is a little bit more about the history, not about the new album. The first thing is it hard to make the band with two, because Satyricon is you and the Frost. If there are, for instance, 4 or 3 people, if you compose or write the lyrics, 3 guys can tell yes or no, but here is the 50-50, so how you do it?
The way that I work in the making of music is I don't really think so much about that it should be to one or several people's liking. I have a vision for the music, and then typically what musicians do is that they get very easily distracted. They start working on something, then they get a new idea, then they go here, another idea and they go there. And what I try to do is I search broadly, and when I find something that I like, I pursue that with determination. And the last thing that I think about is, what other people think about it. So this whole thing with, like, there isn't even a 50-50 in Satyricon. It's basically just I make the songs and the lyrics, and then when I work together with Frost, together we try and find solutions that can refine my ideas, improve my ideas, make them better, and certainly in his case, play his part as a drummer to help lift the quality of what I do.
You said that the new album is not a game changer for you. I think that the Rebel Extravaganza was the game changer. Can you agree with it?
Rebel is not just a game changer for Satyricon, but for the genre, I think. It was a time where everything was turning gothic, and that's
no
not
more excess. Yes.
So for us, it was very important to do something more contemporary, which wasn't had anything to do with gothic, and so I think that was an influential album. But I think, Deep Calleth Upon Deep is a very important record, because it's an album that, regardless if you like it or not, it has integrity, honesty, and spirituality. And these are core qualities in any good form of art, and even more important in 2017, where, even in metal, what is it that these records are for? They are so that bands can go on tour, so that they can make friends, so that they can be with girls, so that they can do drugs, so that their agents can make their commission on their shows, so that their managers can make commission on their shows and on their t-shirts.
Only rock and roll.
And it's like a business,
Yeah.
So I can wholeheartedly say that what we have tried to do is to do something which is independent from all of that, which is just a work of art on its own, which is also something that doesn't have to be overly obvious.